Welcome back. Now, Niger's deposed President Mohamed Bazoum could be prosecuted for high treason and undermining national security. Niger's military junta announced that it had gathered evidence to prosecute the deposed president and his local and foreign accomplices for high treason and undermining the internal and external security of Niger. Bazoum is being held captive with his family at the presidential official residence in Niamey amid growing concerns about their health and safety. Now, the charges came after a Nigerian delegation said that Niger's coup leaders were open to diplomacy to resolve the crisis. Now, to look into the latest developments and other matters in Niger, we are joined now by a senior researcher for Transnational Threats and International Crime Division at the Institute for Security Studies, Martin Iwi. Martin, good morning, and thanks so much for speaking to us here on Morning Live.
Thank you. Good morning to you and good morning to your listeners.
So let's look at some of the latest developments. Niger's military say that they will prosecute the deposed President Mohamed Bazoum for high treason. Is this a sign that the junta is actually hardening its stance and they are not about to let Bazoum go?
Well, they are the default authorities today in Niger. They are the ones that are controlling Niger. They are the ones that are responsible for making the laws. They are the ones that are responsible for executing the constitution of Niger. They are really capable of doing anything until we have the external intervention. And I think that's why they are saying, and we all know that President Bazoum is still under their control. They've taken Bazoum hostage, and therefore they can, administer justice, or what they call justice, in quote, to President Bazoum. As we know, they have been trying to put a lot of pressure on Bazoum to formally resign, which will actually formalize their authority to say they're taking over, or the president resigned, and that's why they took over in order to establish law and order. But again, this is all very, very contested.
So Bazoum, though in captivity, was able to publish an article in the Washington Post, Martin, and in it he stated that he was a hostage and that the coup would have devastating consequences for Niger, also for the region and the entire world. So do you think that these charges emanate from that article, or is this simply some of the repercussions that Bazoum always had coming?
The article is not the first thing that Bazoum has published. Remember, Bazoum, though he's under house arrest, he has his telephone, he has all his communication tools, so he's able to reach out to the rest of the world. He's been making WhatsApp messages, he's been tweeting, he's been writing articles. So this is not the first time that he is talking to the rest of the world about his captivity. I think this is coming from the fact that Bazoum is refusing to resign, which will formalize the authority of the coupists.
So we look at, what some of the response has been to this particular coup. And of course, Ecowas, they've threatened the use of force. But let's talk about Ecowas and, the course of action that they can and possibly need to take in this instance.
Look, we should all know that Ecowas is implementing the supplementary protocol to the protocol on the mechanism for conflict prevention. Now, that protocol deals with matters of democracy. And what it says under its Article 1C is that there is zero tolerance for power obtained or maintained by unconstitutional means. So ECOWAS has this policy of zero tolerance for unconstitutional changes of power, including coups. And therefore, they can use whatever methods necessary to intervene. And when Niger signed this protocol, actually the protocol was signed in Niger. When Niger signed this protocol, it gave up part of its sovereignty, authorizing ECOWAS to use those means that it has in order to reinstall constitutional order in their country. So ECOWAS has threatened, we all know, to send in a force. And there has indeed been mobilization of forces in West Africa. And we believe that depending on the developments in Niger, this intervention is inevitable. So it is left to the cookies. I was very happy the other day, I think over the weekend, when they accepted to solve this problem diplomatically. They accepted the delegation from Nigeria, and through them, they told them that they are ready to speak to ECOWAS. So that was the biggest development. Otherwise, I believe we would have been talking about an ECOWAS force already in Niger.
Now, regardless of ECOWAS's stance against military takeovers, this is the 7th coup in Western Central Africa combined over the last 3 years. What is the implication of that for stability in the region and perhaps a change of guard, as it were, as we've seen in some of the West African countries where coups have taken place?
Look, there are some fundamental causes for coups in West Africa. There is poverty that is increasing, population is hungry for development, population is hungry to end hunger. So all of this, and then you have an elite which is monopolizing the power, it's monopolizing resources, it's monopolizing means, economic means. Meaning that there is no equal access to resources in these countries in West Africa. And that coup can happen anywhere, including even Nigeria. So when we see a coup in any of these countries, it is because of these fundamental, and I would say they are mostly fundamental economic factors. In the case of Niger, we also saw that there were some political factors. This coup has come from some personal development, some interpersonal conflict, and then it took on that broader dimension of the whole nation. But for me, I would blame the intransigent nature of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. The way ECOWAS has responded to all the coups. In none of the cases have we had a consistent response. To some extent, one will say this is okay because each response has to be adapted to the situation on the ground. But the application of the principle has not been consistent, and I think that's the problem. And that's why you had a coup in Guinea, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and now Niger. This is because of the intransigent character of the response of ECOWAS. And because of ECOWAS...
Well, apologies there. We've lost that connection there to Martin Iwi from the Institute of Security Studies. And of course, we're talking about the latest developments in Niger following that coup. And of course, the Junta now indicating that they will prosecute the deposed president of that country, Mohamed Bazoum, for high treason. And Martin Iwi just giving us his views on what is actually happening there. ECOWAS, he says, needs to shoulder some of the blame for what they have done and how they have acted in the face of previous coups in some of the other West African states such as Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea. And of course, it's going to be interesting to see how this matter in Niger is actually resolved. We do have Martin Iwi back with us. So Martin, thanks for getting back to us. Just going back to the forces that ECOWAS have now gathered, and the US and France, we know, also have more than 2,500 military personnel in the region, and they've also invested hundreds of millions of dollars in military assistance and training Niger's forces. So in terms of how they have responded to this coup, what should we read into that? And also, Do you think that they have little choice but to basically recognize the junta in order to continue the security cooperation in the region?
No, I don't think that they will recognize the junta. I think it is not part of the Ecowas character. The only way, I don't think Ecowas see it as a recognition, is to say for the sake of stability, for the sake of peace, they will accept a timetable for the junta to reinstall constitutional order. Whether that is interpreted as a tacit recognition of the junta or not, but I believe it has been a decision that Ecowas has made over and over in order to restore constitutional democracy without going to war. But you were talking about the significance of this coup. Now, what this coup has shown, what this coup has brought to the fore for everyone to see in Africa is the huge disparity, the gap between the elite, the political elite, the so-called leaders, and the people. You see that the people see this coup as a liberation from the neo-colonial yokes that they find themselves. That's something we must also address. And I don't think that ECOWAS is integrating that in its response to coup d'etat in Africa, and particularly this coup in Niger. Because if that factor is not addressed, the people will continue to see ECOWAS as an organization that does not represent them. Because what the people have been complaining is that Niger is extremely rich, a country well endowed with natural resources, one of the world's biggest producers of uranium. When it comes to gold, they are also way up there, a lot of natural resources. But if you go to Niger, you can count how many roads are tarred. And these are recent because before it used to be one. So this is a country that is mired in poverty, abject poverty, of which it has too much resources. So the people see this as a liberation. And to say finally, the resources of Niger will benefit the people. ECOWAS has to take this into consideration, that people are fighting neocolonialism. They are not fighting their leaders. They are not fighting the authorities. They are fighting neocolonialism, which they believe has not benefited them. And I think it's a powerful factor that whoever is going to respond in Niger must integrate in order to bring the people on board.
Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. That's where we have to leave it. Martin Iwe is a senior researcher for Transnational Threats and International Crime Division at the Institute for Security Studies, speaking to us about the latest developments in the coup in Niger.